This is my second conference, my first ever virtual conference. So, good morning, delegates. That's at your time. It's afternoon here in the UK. I'm having some technical difficulties with my systems at the moment, so I'm not able to show you any PowerPoints or anything like that. So I've decided, or whether the computer has basically decided for me, that I will do a similar conference to what I did in Derby at the beginning of the year. I will basically go through my experiences and hopefully show you what happens when bigotry is left unchecked and unchallenged. So my title for my presentation is called Section 28, Unchecked Bigotry. Discrimination has no boundaries. It has no respect. From the very earliest memories I had as a child, which was around my 5th birthday, I can remember being in survival mode from my own family. It's been that way my entire childhood, right into my earlier adulthood. As a boy, the government brought in anti-LGBT legislation in 1988, which is similar to the Don't Say Gay bill in the United States. It targeted my entire community. I wasn't even aware of anything to do with my community at that age. I mean, I was only a child. At that age, I didn't really learn anything about the community either. There was no Stonewall, there was no LGBT help for me because obviously I was still a child. I didn't even know what I was at that age. I later learned that people couldn't discuss or help anybody who identified as LGBT. They ran the risk of losing their jobs or being targeted themselves by authorities for even trying to help anybody who identified as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. They ran the risk of being ostracized themselves. And bigotry was basically widespread. It was unchallenged. This legislation was only repealed back in 2003. So it basically ran for more than nearly 20 years. The problem I had was that my mother knew I was different. I didn't know she was homophobic at the time. My mother treated me like I was a monster. I was just a child, but she knew I was gay and started torturing and abusing me because she believed I was deviant. My mother used to lock me in a bedroom with no access to a toilet, no access to food, water, any bedding, any lighting, any access to fresh air. I was basically kept a prisoner as a 6-year-old child. Just like the press had been saying and the government had been saying, she treated me like I was a deviant. By my 8th birthday, she married a paedophile. He was heterosexual, but that didn't really matter. People concentrated on the LGBT community and continued to accuse them of things that they weren't responsible for, things that they didn't do. My mother abandoned me in social care, accusing me of what my father, my stepfather at the time, was eventually convicted of. But it was literally too late for me. I was subjected to human trafficking for the pleasure of paedophiles nationwide for 4 years, simply because my mother, as an adult, told 12 children in a children's home that I had abused my sister, which was very hard to hear from an adult, let alone your own family. So I was subjected to horrendous beatings, sexual abuse, and this was ignored, unchecked, and even encouraged by people simply because I was forced out as gay at 9 years old. Because I was gay, I was seen as I was up for it. I was seen as a threat. I was seen as the problem. So people basically ignored my cries for help. and people would actively encourage that abuse themselves just because I was LGBT. Now, being trafficked has taught me a lot of survival techniques. It's taught me quite a lot about how low people will go when it comes to bigotry. And it still affects me in adulthood today, my relationships, and how I see people. Forgive me that this is the second time I've only talked about this, so it can still be quite hard for me to explain it. I basically spent my first 4 years outside of my parents' abuse in a children's home, constantly being beaten up, sexually abused, and trafficked into a national paedophile ring for 4 years, and nothing was ever done. Everything was excused. Members of staff were actively encouraging that kind of abuse. And there's so many things that need to be looked at in regards to safeguarding children themselves, but also protecting them against people who are homophobic, transphobic, biphobic. So yeah, apologies. This is my second time, so I'm kind of losing track a little bit. Cassandra,
Yes.
sorry. I don't really know what I'm doing here. So my technical thing's going crazy on this end.
You're doing
Am I still
great.
being seen?
We can hear you clearly and everything's good. So thank you for sharing your story. It's really powerful, and I know it's difficult. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thank you. The one thing that I'm wanting to get out of this is I would like people to see what happens when people use bigotry against people who are completely innocent. There are a lot of paedophiles out there. I unfortunately came across someone on social media 2 weeks ago because of the work that I'm now doing with safeguarding children and working with local authorities. I knew at one point that my work would uncover this kind of behavior as an adult. And I was contacted by a paedophile 2 weeks ago who basically used my book as a way to get in, as a ruse, as a survivor, potentially himself. But then he went into absolute graphic details about what he was doing, so much so that I've actually had to involve the police. And it just shows that these people are still out there. This still happens with children. People are still being used by these people to get what they are. Sorry. People are still susceptible to this kind of treatment by these people. And this person is known by the police, and they are actively working now on dealing with him. He is a lifer, so someone who spent more than 12 years in prison, who is now out on license. But because obviously what he did 2 weeks ago, the police believe was in a way to gratify what he'd done with children, and he then latched onto an adult as a survivor. It kind of shows that, you know, even as an adult, you can still be vulnerable to this kind of behavior. So my experiences as a child has taught me quite a lot of survival techniques. I have an uncanny ability to see people's agendas, see people's hidden behaviors. Their subconscious really does give them away once you've had that kind of experience. But also, I've had two really helpful families that have really looked out for me from a child into adulthood. I was legally fostered by a Scottish literary family, the Dacius family, who obviously have integrated me into their family fully. They are Scotland's most decorated literary historians, and I decided to follow their footsteps by writing my book to obviously tell my story. But they have also taught in many universities in the United States. So for me, trying to obviously follow the work that they've been doing writing wise is something I'm quite passionate about. But then there's the other family, which is a Jamaican family who have basically guided me. There's no legality in it, you know, that they were a link family who came to a children's home to take a child out to go to the cinema to give them some sort of normality in life. They knew I was gay, and they totally didn't worry about that at all, and they just took me underneath their wing. And I've got two, I would call them my brothers, who are younger than me, and Pauline. And I was brought up as part of a Jamaican family when I was a kid, and that again has taught me quite a lot about how the Black community suffer from bigotry. With me being part of the LGBT community, we have our own bigotry as well. So I've learned quite a lot through those two families. And what I've learned, I'm now trying to impart into other people so that they can prevent abuse from happening, but also understand what bigotry can do to people. You know, adults today are making legislation about things that they really don't understand, that really don't know about, and it can be quite detrimental to children as well as adults. People can't help the way that they're born. You know, people can't help that they're born Black. People can't help that they're born gay, lesbian, transgender. They just need that support and that love from people around them to help them, guide them to be the person or people that they should be, rather than victimize them, bully them, and demonize them for being different. And that's what I hope to do. I hope to show people that, you know, no matter what they go through, they can come out the other side and they can still be successful. My abuse has had a very detrimental impact on my mental health. I mean, I tried on 4 occasions to commit suicide. Thankfully, they weren't successful. But people allowed me as a child to suffer to the point where that option was the only option left. And I truly believe, you know, if people understood what communities go through, what my community go through, what the Black community go through, you know, they need to understand that, you know, just because we're different, you know, we're not monsters. You know, we're just normal people who look different or love someone different to you. So yeah, I mean, if anybody has any questions, I'm quite happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Rich, we got some great things in the chat.
Okay, I
We're
can't see
honored
the
to
chat, by
listen
the
to
way.
you. Yeah, I got you. Your words
Okay.
are powerful. We appreciate your honesty in sharing such a difficult story. And, you know, we hear you in terms of and appreciate you for being sharing your story because it's a vulnerable space. And so we're all with you. We're all with
Thank
you
you.
in that.
So I have a question for you, Richie. So one of the things that's we're facing here in the US is the don't say gay stuff, which
Yeah.
is doing what sounds similar to what the Section 28 stuff was. So I just wonder, you know, what's the cautionary tale that you would tell people who are living in states where it's becoming illegal and anybody who's LGBTQ is called a groomer and so forth? What would you say to those folks in terms of what they can do, what they should do, what those states should do?
I mean, firstly, the states, it's wrong for them to demonize somebody like that, because if the shoe was on the other foot, how would they like it, for a start?
Right.
people can't help being born gay. If it's to a situation where your life is being put at risk, then it's probably not safe to be in those areas. But I think campaigning is vital. People need to have a voice. People need to speak up, because it's not fair for someone to be demonized, to be humiliated in such a way just because they love someone differently to them. Um, I think I can remember rightly in the Bible, there is no mention that homosexuality is a sin, as far as I'm concerned. So
Mm.
it's individuals' misconception about homosexuality that they are bringing something in that is completely at odds with religion, with decency, with common sense. While people are demonizing one section of society who happen to be innocent, you have a lot of other people in other demographics, i.e., law, police. You have pastors, who are all coming out now, being arrested and convicted of child molestation. So if these people really cared about child protection, if they really wanted to stop child sexual abuse, they would focus their energy on the right people who are causing this, rather than communities who just want to live their life.
Right. Well said. I'm also very, very intrigued about, you said you had survival skills, and like one of them was your ability to see other people's agendas. I wish I had that ability, frankly, but I just wanted to kind of drill in a little deeper on that.
Yeah,
But what can you identify other kind of things that you've learned over the years that help you get through these difficult times?
I mean, one really poignant one is I could have ended up. Okay, there was a murder that happened in the UK which literally rocked the entire country. It was called the Soham murders. It was Holly and Jessica Chapman. It was a caretaker, a heterosexual caretaker, who kidnapped and murdered two young girls. I had hundreds of those situations. I was made to go with hundreds and hundreds of paedophiles. I had to do what I was told in order to get out of those situations alive.
Mm-hmm.
That means anything I had to do to get out of those situations. And it basically gave me the skill to see a way out of situations.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me that urgent survival skill. If there was a dire situation, I had to think fast. Um, I mean, I became a paramedic as well, in the UK before I do my current job. And I got that job purely because I could deal with situations quick. I had to be fast on my feet to save a person's life. And I have so many different survival skills, but the most poignant one is knowing how to deal with the situation very quickly, and so it can basically save my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. I'm also struck by, there's a guy in the States named Bruce Perry who's done a lot of work with surviving traumatic experiences, and he's fond of saying that it just takes one relationship. If you can find somebody that loves you and cares for you, that's really, really important. And I hear that in your story that, you have the Jamaican family, then that you have the
Yeah,
Davis family. Can you talk a little
yeah.
bit about that?
I have three people that I can definitely say that have given me anchors, that I've
Mhm,
anchored my emotions, my mental state onto. And that would be Pauline Blake, and that would be Anna Dacius, and that would be Benjamin Barlow. Pauline Blake was the first person that I ever met who showed me love and compassion. And this was a Jamaican woman in a I mean, the Jamaican community, I have to say, is quite homophobic in many ways. But this was a woman who was totally taking everybody's concerns and dismissing them completely and saying, this is just a little boy,
Mhm.
regardless what you have to think, this is a little boy and he needs love and he needs attention. And that really showed, that was the first time that I was ever shown love and compassion by another person. And then Anna, when she was trying to adopt me, when she was trying to foster me through the care system, this was a family that I never met, who had all their own issues. They were Jewish. They'd worked in America. They knew all about the Second World War. They knew all about the atrocities by the Germans and all that kind of thing. And this was a family who literally took a young gay boy and wanted to take him out of that whole abuse cycle. And they really did try their hardest to do that. And that showed me again, people who go through trauma themselves can really have that compassion for someone else.
Mhm.
And then there's my husband. He's the
He seems like a
first
very
man.
decent guy. I had the
He's
pleasure of meeting him.
You
Yeah.
did, yeah. He's a fantastic guy. First man I've ever loved, and we married on Christmas Day in New York City in
Wow.
2017. So we have a US wedding certificate. Um, and he, for the first time, I mean, I've had relationships before when people have heard my story and they've either run from it or they've taken advantage by, I would say, my first boyfriend put me back into prostitution as an adult,
Oh,
um, which was really, really hard. And it really affected how I trusted people in relationships after that. But thankfully, along came Ben, and he nurtured me. He cared for me, and he showed me what I needed to do to get my story out there, what I needed to do to actually talk about it and not feel embarrassed about it.
yeah. That's powerful. It's also, I mean, the fact that you've chosen to tell your story, I can't even remotely imagine how difficult that is in terms of
Yeah,
having the courage to share of that much pain. I mean, you have an incredible story, but you do it, and you do it with some skill and you're articulate and you write well. I mean, that's a very difficult book, but it's a very important book, right? So,
yeah, yeah. Thank you. I just think I can't keep quiet about it. Because if I keep quiet about it, it can happen again. And the main thing that I want is for this not to happen again. Children can be children. Children need to be children, whether they're gay, straight, black, Chinese, whatever. It doesn't really matter. People are people. We're all red underneath. We all bleed the same. You know. Um, and I just think kids need that support. Kids need that guidance. That they don't need to be discriminated against, because that's setting a tone for them. It's basically given them reason to hate someone else, and I don't want to do that. I don't. I want my story to be used as a training tool, as something that will stop this kind of abuse, which will highlight the real abusers. That needs
Mhm.
to be, that is important for me, because there's a lot of abusers that are going under the radar because they're concentrating on the wrong thing.
If there are others on the live feed, if you have questions or comments or things that you want to share, please use the chat of the Q&A. Otherwise, I don't want to monopolize the questions, but I'm enjoying
Well,
being
we
in
have
a
we
conversation with Richie, but you might
we
want
have
to
here
join
your
us too. Go ahead.
yeah. So you have your
Sorry.
experience with someone said your experience with survival skills, including appraisal of the situation, is making um her think of how we can encourage the positive skills in others. So you're being able to put those skills into how you have put them in your life, survival skills to help you through those difficult times.
Yeah, I mean, people's subconscious really does it does give them away sometimes. You know, if someone's got an agenda, it can be quite, you know, clear to see in a person how they behave, how they come across, and how they approach you. If someone's genuine, if someone's happy, if someone's, you know, kind and gentle, that comes across really well. But if someone's got a hidden agenda, that really does come across, and I can really spot that out. It's freaking me out sometimes when I can see it. You know, it really
Like a
does.
superpower, right? So
Superpower. I wish I never had, but you know,
yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah. So
There's a
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Cassandra. Sorry.
there's a good question here. What questions would you have liked workers have asked you?
Sorry, what questions would
So workers like a
Yeah,
child welfare
workers.
worker or a
all right,
caseworker,
so
a
social
therapist.
services. What questions? Why did people not listen to me? Communication is huge. It's the biggest thing. I mean, I spent my whole childhood trying to tell people what was going on, um, and nobody was listening. Police weren't listening. Social services weren't listening. The thing with bigotry, the thing with homophobia is that if you have somebody in a position of power, of responsibility, and they are corrupted by bigotry, that will then affect how that person will do their job, basically. And that was evident, sorry, in my upbringing. I mean, I was trying my best to tell people, and they just weren't listening. The question that they should have been asking is, you know, what's going on? You know, what's happening? Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's happening. You know, these are important questions that need to be asked, because if you can see a child suffering, if you know a child is physically showing signs that they are suffering, ask those important questions. It's important to ask those questions, because if those questions aren't asked, then this will continue to be unchecked.
So
Hey,
there's a
this is
question.
Shelby. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Hi, Richie. I'm Shelby Johnson. I work in the state of Tennessee. And first of
Hi.
all, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really am happy that you are at this point where you can share and help others who are going through this experience. I kind of wanted to get your opinion. I work a lot with a multidisciplinary team that looks at combating sex trafficking of children. We do a lot of cases that are kids in the foster care system. And so I've noticed a lot of the social workers that I'm consulting with they have a hard time in general understanding that a child can be trafficked, but it's even harder when it's a boy. It's like they can't see that a boy can be trafficked too. And so I utilize the CANS assessment to kind of show them, like, these are the areas where I'm seeing flags that this young person is potentially being victimized, and just continue to encourage them to make referrals for services. And I'm just wondering if you've had that same experience where, because you're a male, it's harder to get help.
Yeah. Well, it was on two fronts with me. I was gay. I was forced out at 9 years old by my own family as a predator. So basically, I had to come out as gay. So I had that going against me, and I had being a male going against me. So people misconstrued the whole thing, that they basically thought that I was up for it and that I was actively encouraging the actual abuse. I mean, my letter that I got back from the council, when I finally took the courage to actually do something about this, they said that I actively encouraged the abuse myself. You know, I'm sorry, but if you are under the age of 16 in the UK, you are not legally able to basically agree to have sex with an adult. If you are a minor, okay, regardless if you're a boy, regardless if you're a girl, people need to think outside the box with this. You know, it cannot be as black and white. People are so manipulative and people are so dark. You need to think really outside the box when it comes to things like this. You need to think that anything is possible. So if someone comes into situation and thinks, no, that's not possible because, you know, he's a boy, or, you know, oh, he's a boy, he's probably up for it himself. They need to get rid of that, because that kind of attitude is not going to help anyone. It's not going to help the boy. It's not going to help the person involved. They really need to see things through the eyes of a child, really.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I definitely see a lot of victim shaming, a lot of blaming the child for, well, you're asking for this or you want to be in this situation. So yeah,
Yeah, but
thank you.
there can also be peer on peer pressure as well. So it could be from an older peer. It can even be from a younger peer. It just depends on the experience of that other child. I was trafficked into a paedophile ring by a child who was 3 years older than me. And this is going to sound really strange. I don't blame him, because he is a victim himself. He was beaten up, he was groomed, he was pressured, he was put into that situation, and then for his own protection, he then groomed people lower than him. So there are victims, and there are victims who become predators, and that cycle needs to be broken. Thank you.
That was a great question, Shelby. Do we have other questions?
Yes.
So, were there any resources or services offered to you as a youth that you found helpful?
Wow. I wish I had Stonewall. I wish I did. I had nobody. I had nothing. Um, I spent nights running away from the children's home that I was in, sleeping in cardboard boxes behind bus stations, because there was nowhere safe for me at all. I didn't have access to services because Section 28 prohibited any help whatsoever. Because I was in a government institution, the police wouldn't help me, the care staff couldn't help me, the actual council couldn't help me. So these services were denied for me. Yeah.
I think there's
I
a
wish I
really
did.
important piece of your story that's, I think, relevant for everybody, which is the running away is not something necessarily bad that young people do. It's a message that wherever they are is not safe for them. And I think listening to the running behavior as a red flag that there's something wrong with the environment that they're running from is a really important lesson learned. Because I think sometimes people view runaway as something that's a characteristic of the psychopathology of young people, but it also is an indicator, and probably that's not even true, but it's an indicator that there's something wrong in the place where people run from, because you're not going to run from someplace you feel safe. You're not going to run from someplace you feel loved. So anyway, I think that's really important. So
Can I just add to that, actually?
yes.
I've just had my files released from social services. So now I have my full files. Social services were well aware of what was going on, but yet they chose
Oh,
not to act.
yikes.
Yeah. There is clear evidence in my files that I was asking them to move me away from the abuse, but they kept me in the home. They said it was the safest place for me. It wasn't.
No.
So I was fighting against the system, the abusers, and the environment.
That's horrific. I mean, what a
Yeah.
system failure. So I'm curious about also, because I'm very, you are a shockingly resilient man. I mean, I think that's probably the thing that two things that blew me away is, number one, how resilient you are to be where you are now. And number two, how much you could be a rock star for advocating for your community, because you're very articulate and passionate about what you do. So I'm really interested in if we can talk a little bit more about your transition. So at some point, the trafficking ended and your recovery started. So can you talk a little bit more about that stage of your life where you were no longer being as victimized as, or it was changing perhaps? I know you had a early adulthood victimization too with your boyfriend.
Yeah. In the care system in the UK, unfortunately, quite a lot of the children are criminalized for no reason whatsoever. My abuser, who was trafficking me into a paedophile ring, he basically committed a criminal act of arson at a time when I was with him. I was subsequently convicted of that unfairly, without any evidence, just because I was with him. I tried to obviously explain my situation at the time, but again, homophobia, this was 1996. I was trying to explain that I was being trafficked into a paedophile ring by this person, and it was ignored again. This person had arson on his record. I mean, I never had anything on mine. And he blamed me, and I was telling the truth, what was going on. So I was then, at that moment, put for my own safety into a more secure accommodation, away from everything, away from the abuser, away from this situation. And I remained there for 2 years whilst that was dealt with. And then I was released at 16 years old as a vulnerable child back into the world with no support. But that break, that 2-year break, that's what changed everything for me, because I was removed from his clutches. I was removed from the National Paedophile Ring. I was put somewhere where nobody could get access to me, which was brilliant. I mean, it changed my life. And I was always asking to be moved from that situation, but nobody did it.
Right.
But when it was taken out of their hands because of something somebody else did, it forced their hands to move me into a safer area.
So you were a suspected fire setter, and they finally put you in a secure setting where you were in fact safe.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's good and bad at the same time, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I'm still obviously dealing with that through legal, because, I was unfairly treated purely because of circumstances by my abuser. I mean, I have to say, he is still incarcerated for life under the Mental Health Act because of what he's done.
Right.
So
there's some justice. So.
There is some justice. He's never going to hurt anybody else again. But I personally, I can't believe it took him doing that for them to finally do something and remove me from the situation. And there's so many people, so many children that are forced into these situations that aren't. They're left in them, and then something else will happen, and then that child is lost forever. Whether that is wrongly convicted, whether they've actually committed an offence of something very serious because they've been pushed to that, or whether they've been murdered, whether they've lost their life because they've been killed by somebody else. I was lucky. I think I was lucky, to be honest.
Yes. So then it was after you're released from this secure facility that you went to the home that then you met, I think Anna is her name, Anna, the Jamaican.
No, I met Anna a long time before that.
Oh, interesting.
I met Anna when I was 11 years old.
Okay.
Anna Dacius is a clinical psychologist, and she was drafted in to figure out what was wrong with me because of my sexuality. I laugh about it now, but back then, obviously, if somebody identified as gay, you obviously had something wrong with you mentally. Little did they know, little did I know, that Anna was lesbian. So So yeah, so they got a clinical psychologist who basically looked after me.
Okay,
Saw
interesting.
saw the situation that I was in, and then went through the whole legality process of legally fostering me.
So that's fascinating because going back to the question before about was any service that you were referred to, did it work? The answer is, well, yes, but not absolutely in the way that you would anticipate it to work. It was because you
Exactly.
were right. So that's absolutely
Yeah.
fascinating. Right.
As far as I'm concerned, I didn't have any support networks. I didn't have any like
Right.
Stonewall or anything like that, and I didn't have any um support within the home. But there was this thing that the council had done to try and cure me of my homosexuality. And inadvertently, it managed to land me the Dacious family. So
Yeah, right. Well, that's fascinating.
yeah,
Absolutely fascinating. I mean, that also is a bit of luck, I suspect, but
it was a lot of luck. Yeah,
right.
a lot
Interesting.
of luck.
And it's unfortunate because we really shouldn't have a system that relies on good fortune to help people survive. I mean, good fortune, of course, is a good thing. But so
Yeah.
tell me about when does the Jamaican family fit into this story? So,
The Jamaican family had, well, I've been obviously interacting them whenever I was in care. So I was in care from the age of 9, and I met Pauline as a social services link worker when I was 10 years old. So she basically came into the children's home, and then she would take me out of the children's home. She's paid for by social services to take me to the cinema, um, to a car boot sale.
mhm,
To buy bric-a-brac, to
right. For those who don't know,
how
a
do
boot is a trunk. So
yeah, so
yeah.
so like if you go to a garage sale or a yard
Yeah,
sale
yeah,
or
flea market. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
yeah, it's flea market that yeah.
yeah.
So Pauline was basically drafted to get me out of that situation for an hour or 2 hours once or twice a week.
Mhm. Got it. All right.
Yeah,
That's interesting. So I'm still fascinated by the survival skills. So we've identified your ability to kind of dissociate, if you will.
yeah,
I think might be a technical term in the middle, and we identified your ability to see people's agendas. Um, you seem today like a pretty joyous person that you found ways to find joy in your life. Um, and that feels genuine to me.
yeah,
So can you talk about that? Because how do you find that
yeah,
joy?
yeah. Um, it was a long time coming, really. I will put it down to my work environment, but also my husband, my home environment. Um, I mean, I've struggled to get where I am today. I mean, I've worked incredibly hard. Um, I worked for the NHS, dealing with people at their worst. So I was called to help people if they've had an accident, heart attack, cardiac arrest, that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
that gave me that kind of strive to want to do something to help other people. I then decided to set up my own business working with animals, because I just love dogs. I love dogs, absolutely love dogs. I've got a
And
little one myself.
dogs always love you, right? So
Dogs always, dogs will love you or they won't like you, and they will tell you like that. It's just great.
yes.
Um, and I love my job, absolutely love my job. Um, just walking out in the fresh air when it's cold, when it's wet, when it's snowing. I'm out in all weathers, and I love it, absolutely love it when I've got a load of dogs in the middle of the countryside. But also my home life, my partner, the support I have from him. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm now in a position. I never thought this would be possible, because when you're living in children's homes, when you're living in social care, you think you're worthless. You think you won't amount to anything. I never thought in a million years that I would ever amount to being a business owner, for one,
Mhm.
have my own house. I mean, I own a property. I mean, like,
Yeah.
how did I do that? You know?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I'm now helping people in another way. I mean, I've tried helping people through, like working for the ambulance service, That didn't end well, by the way. I was stabbed on duty by some drunken person, and that ended my career with that. But the dogs, it just, I don't know, it gives you that
Yeah,
happiness,
it's
that
fascinating.
emotional. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, we are coming to the close of this session. You have been so wonderful to share your story, because I know I can only imagine how painful that is, but your story is compelling because of for a variety of different reasons. It's awful, but it's also like a sign of hope, of recovery and resilience and joy. So I don't know if there's any last words you want to impart to all of us, but we really, really appreciate you and really appreciate you sharing your story with us. I think it's enormously helpful. So
Thank you. There is two things I'd like to actually end with. One is trauma, and this is something that I always come across with other people. People say, my abuse is not as severe as yours. What I would say is that everyone's trauma leads to the same result. It always gives the same emotional response, physical response. Um, so in many ways, your trauma is no different. It's your trauma, and it affects you in exactly the same way as it affects anybody else. So never ever think that your trauma is not valid. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you're a child in care, or if you know a child in care, it's not the end. You can reach goals you never thought would be possible. I mean, I never thought I'd be a business owner. I'd never thought I'd own a home. I'd never thought I'd be in this position, helping people understand what happened to me and trying to prevent it. I'm living the best life right now, and I love it, absolutely love it. And these kids in care now can live to lead a full, fulfilling life. That's my two final points.